All right. Welcome, folks, for our TMN Tuesday July event. As always, we get started directly at noon when the lunch whistle goes off here where I'm logged in from today. We have a wonderful presentation and speaker today. Before we get started, Michelle's going to open us up with some comments.
Yeah, few things. So thank you, everyone, for reaching out. I know many of you know that I am right here. I live in Hunt, Texas. I'm in Kerrville. And I want to thank all of you for reaching out and just checking on our community, checking on myself and my family, all of our Hill Country Chapter Master Naturalist members here. Thanks for your thoughts and prayers. One of the questions that we've been receiving continuously over the past few days, and certainly yesterday leading up into today, now that a work week is underway, how can we help? We've got a lot of questions, and the question has been asked repeatedly and over the past few days. And in my experience here in the Hill Country, I know there are other communities across Texas, even over these past few days, that have sustained flooding and flooding damage. But to give you an example from my community and what we've been going through right now, our call for resources, for cleaning supplies, for food, water, clothes, and the essential basics of life, those have been met at this time. We are inundated with those items, and thank our whole Texas community and nation for all of that. We are still in the search and recovery phases right now. And I think the biggest ways that you can help as a society, as a community, as an individual, is to think of that next phase, our rebuilding phase. I know several of the communities that have been impacted have different funds set up, and several communities that have been impacted have different relief services and social services centers set up for recovery, for the next steps. And so, as an example, in Kerrville, the greater Hill Country, Texas area, one of those is the Community Foundation of the Texas Hill Country. They've set up a Kerr County Flood Relief Fund. I encourage you within each county or each of the major communities where these events have happened to reach out and seek those major flood relief support efforts. And then connect with the major social services and relief services, their coordination centers. In our community, it's the Salvation Army that the county and the city are partnering with to coordinate that. And again, in our county, in our Hill Country area, for the Major Relief Fund, it's the Kerr County Flood Relief Fund through the Community Foundation that has been established. And just an extra note that in other communities, such as Cornell, that area, the San Gabriel River near Georgetown, those resources and major social services and fund supports may be different than what is here in our own Kerr County. So wherever is nearest and dearest to your heart, I encourage you to support those efforts as an individual. And again, think rebuilding, the next steps. Right now, we have so many resources here in our community helping out. And like I said, within our community, at least right now, we are still in the search and recovery stages. So next stages are cleanup and then rebuilding.
All right, thank you. Hard to move along after messages like that, but maintaining normalcy helps to keep the focus. So I'm going to move into our virtual meeting room etiquette, as we always do with our TMN Tuesdays. So virtual meeting room etiquette that you see every month here shares our WebEx help guide that's linked on our website. If you are new to our TMN Tuesday series, you as a participant cannot unmute or share your screen. or share your video. That's to give Tia, our presenter today, the full attention that she deserves for the wonderful material that she's going to be sharing with us here shortly. If you are a Master Naturalist, logging today's recording, watching either live or watching the event either live or as a recording can count for advanced training. Please work with your local chapter to have that logged appropriately. And then please help us with any chat questions, as I'll be helping to monitor those today. Use your best spelling and grammar possible so that we can ask the questions that you intend to be asked. We also have a survey that we share each month as a way to collect feedback and participation in these live webinar events. And so please feel free to use this link. I'll drop it here in the chat in just a second so that you can easily grab that and participate in that survey as well. And then a few announcements as we get closer to October and we get closer to a couple of major milestones within the, or major deadlines within the program. Our Pollinators for Texas project funding program, the 2025 award year is currently in the judging phase right now. So if you are a chapter who has applied for that 2025 funding, please be patient with us. We had a number of applications, excited to get to read through all of those, and we'll be hoping to share those award announcements, I believe, in August or September, but all updates will be made on our website, and that's that QR code there. And then our big event this fall, our annual meeting, we have recently launched is October 16th through the 19th in College Station, Texas. We've recently launched the full agenda and registration prices. Registration itself will not go live until the first week of August. So please make sure that you are watching your emails, you have joined the listserv, you're following our social media. All of those are the platforms where we will announce our registration activity as soon as it's available. We also have new hotel room blocks as the main hotel and conference center is currently fully booked. Although I have seen a few rooms open up here and there as people's rooms and travel plans change. So always keep an eye on that as well. Again, our website is the kitchen sink for all things annual meeting and is updated constantly. So if you ever have any questions, please check our website first. And I can assure you that many of those questions are easily found on that website. All right, Michelle, would you like to introduce Tia?
All right, so excited to have Tia with us today. Tia is one of our own. To start with, she is a Master Naturalist with just this year. With our, which chapter are you with, Tia?
The Rio Grande Valley chapter.
All right. And then prior to that, Tia was a Mississippi Master Naturalist from 2022. And so when she came here, she joined us right away. Tia, in her day job, is a fisheries and wildlife technician with the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department Coastal Fisheries Division. She works out of the Brownsville office. She has a degree from Cornell University and then a master's degree from Mississippi State University. She spent her time there. She spent her time before here working with freshwater and saltwater fisheries, oyster aquaculture, and in aquariums. So definitely the expert to talk about today's topic, coastal fisheries and the saltwater fishes of the Texas Gulf Coast. Thank you, Tia.
Am I good to go?
Yes, you should have presenter rights now.
Sweet, thank you.
Absolutely.
Let me just do all the share stuff again.
Thank you. Got some Mississippi fans in the chat too.
Thank you, guys. I'm sad to say I've never actually been up to Mississippi State. I did my entire degree from Biloxi. So sorry for any Bulldogs fans. But hey everyone, I'm really glad to be here. As you all heard, I'm Tia. I'm a fish and wildlife technician with the Brownsville office. I work with Texas Parks and Wildlife Coastal Fisheries. And something that I've learned while being here on the job is that not a lot of people know what we do at Parks and Wildlife Coastal Fisheries. So I just want to talk about what we do here in this division and just teach you a little bit more about the saltwater fishes that we have here on the Texas Gulf Coast, because we have a lot. And I think it's really cool to highlight some of the diversity that we have here. Oh, okay. So cool. That's how we're going to transition the slides. So I just wanted to go over a brief overview of what we're going to talk about today. And I just want to make it clear, I cannot see the chat right now. So if y'all have any questions, we're going to get to those at the end. Yeah. So we're going to talk about what is Texas Parks and Wildlife Coastal Fisheries, what do we do here at Coastal Fisheries, how can you better ID your saltwater fish, and what major groups of saltwater fish do we find in Texas, and how you can help us better do our job. That picture right there is one of my coworkers handling a cobia that we got here at our office a little over a year ago. So if any of y'all are anglers, you're probably familiar with cobia, and if you're not, that's a really cool fish, in my opinion, that we can find off the coast of Texas. They get really big, maybe 5 feet long. So here at the Coastal Fisheries Division, what is it? So we've got several branches of Texas Parks and Wildlife that you may be familiar with. Some of them you might not be familiar with. One of them is state parks, and this is probably the branch that most people are familiar with here. It's actually, when it comes to the resources and the employment at Texas Parks and Wildlife, this is about where 50% of the people at Texas Parks and Wildlife are stationed at. And it makes sense. It's Texas Parks and Wildlife. So about 50% of us are in the state parks. But then the rest of us are divided up into a bunch of different branches like law enforcement. And you can think of this like the game wardens and the state park police. But then we also have our executive branch, financial, human resources, support, communications, the people who go on social media, infrastructure, IT, legal, the people who work in the wildlife division, taking care of all our deer and our birds, inland fisheries, the people who deal with all the fish that live in our lakes and our rivers, and then coastal fisheries. That's me, the people who work in our estuaries and off of our coast. So what are we doing? We've got several goals when we're working in coastal fisheries, and that is to manage the marine resources of Texas for an estimated 2.7 million anglers and 31 million consumers of aquatic products while preventing depletion or waste. And that's a very technical definition, but we're also focusing on habitat conservation and restoration at the same time. Coastal fisheries, we kind of have a bit of a focus on that angling side as well as conservation because a lot of our funding comes from the saltwater anglers from the purchase of fishing licenses. But I do want to emphasize that we are also have an emphasis on conservation and habitat management as well, just for the betterment of the aquatic environment. To give you an idea of the chain of command that we have here at Coastal Fisheries, it is like legally based because this is a state office. We report all the way at the top to the governor. Our legislation comes from the legislator. Then we report from the Texas Parks and Wildlife Commission. A lot of our regulations come from the commission, which then comes down from the executive to the executive director, which then reports to us, the Coastal Fisheries Division. That's how everything works here at Coastal Fisheries. Some legislative mandates that we have to think about when we're working in coastal fisheries. We need to regulate the means, methods, manner, time, and places. We need to conduct scientific investigations. We need to gather statistical information, issue permits, and participate in management through membership in commissions, councils, and committees. These are very legal terms here, and I promise the whole presentation isn't like this. This is basically what the state legislator has determined that coastal fisheries has to do as an agency. But how do we do this? We do this through collecting data and then using that data to set fishing regulations and then to conserve and protect that habitat. We've got several different coastal fisheries offices set up throughout the state of Texas along the coast. You may be familiar with some of them, you may not be. I work at the Brownsville office all the way down at the Mexican border, but there's several offices all the way up the coast. There's 2 in Corpus, there's 1 in Rockport. I'm actually headed up there later today. There's 1 in Port O'Connor. It shows 2 in Palacios, and that's because there's also a research facility up there. But there's pretty much 1 in Palacios. There's the Lake Jackson facility, which is a hatchery. There's one in Dickinson, which is over by Galveston, and then there's one in Port Arthur, which is over by Sabine Lake and over by the Louisiana border. So with all these coastal fisheries offices, we're pretty much covering the entire Texas Gulf Coast. And with these management areas, you can see we're covering all the different bay systems that go across Texas. It covers 4 million acres of bays, estuaries, and the Gulf of Mexico, all the way to 9 nautical miles off the shore. And that's just another legal definition that was determined, I'm going to be honest, I don't know how many years ago, but it's just 9 nautical miles off the coastline of Texas is where state waters end and where federal waters begin. So after 9 nautical miles is where NOAA management begins. And then that's where the joint Gulf management begins, where we manage the waters alongside NOAA to 200 nautical miles. And then after that point, it becomes international waters, I believe. So that's the management areas that are considered with coastal fisheries, Texas Parks and Wildlife. Although what we do on a day-to-day basis are mostly the bays, estuaries, and the Gulf of Mexico to 9 nautical miles, just because they're easier to access. When you think of the monitoring programs that coastal fisheries are doing on a day-to-day basis, you might be wondering what exactly it is we're doing on a day-to-day basis. So we can split up our monitoring programs into 2 different categories. We've got our resource monitoring programs and our harvest monitoring programs. Our resource programs are going to be considered fishery independent, and these are just vocab words, I suppose. While our harvest programs are fishery dependent. So our fishery independent programs are the programs that Texas Parks and Wildlife are collecting, independent of what the anglers are collecting. This is when we are going out into our bay systems and collecting data on inventory of our fisheries, what is out there, what is available to catch, and recruitment. What fishes are breeding, what fishes are out there as babies and will one day be large enough to be able to catch. And then our harvest data are fishery dependent, which is dependent on anglers. We are then going out and contacting the anglers fishing Texas waters and then asking them, what have you caught? Where did you catch it? So that we can then figure out what is being caught in our waters. Because we cannot be out catching fish every single day of the week as much as we'd like to. So by combining these 2 types of monitoring programs, fishery independent and fishery dependent, together we can get a more complete picture of the total number of fish in Texas waters. And using that better understanding of the total fish population in Texas waters, we can then better manage our fisheries. So with these resource fishery independent monitoring programs that Texas Parks and Wildlife does, it might be a little self-evident what an angler does, but what do we do at Texas Parks and Wildlife to check what is out there in the waters? We do several different types of fish sampling surveys. We do gill nets. So we set out these long nets. They have several different mesh sizes. So imagine like a little crisscross mesh. They might be 6 inches in size mesh, all the way to 3 inches in mesh size. And we'll set them out overnight and we'll come back in the morning and pull them up and see what we catch. These will typically target adult size fish and maybe juvenile to adult size finfish. And sometimes they'll catch crabs as well. You can see in the photos, we caught an alligator gar, and that's me in the photo. And in the right photo, you can see that we caught some sharks as well. So you can catch some pretty large fish with the gill nets, and this gives us a really good idea of what adult size fish are in the fishery without relying on anglers to catch those fish. So the gill nets are really important in helping us get an idea of what adult fish are out in the water. We also use bag seines. So this is when we go up to the shoreline and we take another little mesh size net, but the mesh is a lot smaller this time. And we put it between 2 poles and we just pull it along the shoreline using 2 people. We pull it for a set number of length and then we put it on the shore and we see what we caught. Because the mesh is a lot smaller and because it's being pulled for a short length, we tend to catch really small things. I am so sorry. I don't know why the phone is ringing. I'm just going to wait for that to be picked up. It's a really nice ringtone, isn't it? There we go. So, so because we're pulling it for a very short length with very small mesh, in a very shallow environment, we're going to catch very small finfish, babies, very recently hatched, and very small shrimp, and baby crabs. So this gives us an idea of what fish are being recently hatched and what may grow up to be larger fish that can be readily catched, or just those smaller fish that are at the base of the food chain that can be eaten by those larger fish. It gives us an idea of the health of the ecosystem. Another type of resource monitoring that we use are bay and gulf trawls. This is when we take a large net. It's kind of like, I want to say a bucket, but it's a net. And we dump it in the water and we drag it behind the boat for about 10 minutes. And we do this in both our bay system and offshore in the Gulf. And we use this to also catch juvenile finfish and shrimp and crabs, although we can do this in much deeper water. This also helps us to determine the recruitment that's happening in our bay systems, but it can also help us catch some of those bottom-dwelling fish and some of those fish that don't swim as fast, such as this spotted eagle ray that my coworker's holding, which was a really cool find. And don't worry, he was released. He wasn't hurt at all. Something that my field office doesn't do, because we don't have a lot of oysters in our area, but that a lot of the other field offices do, is oyster dredges. And this is very similar to a bag seine, but they'll take this claw-like thing, and they'll drag it behind their boat as well for about 3 minutes, and they'll pick up some oysters, and based on what they find in that oyster net, that oyster thing that they pick up, how big the oysters are, whether or not they're alive or dead, and what other animals are in there, they can use this to determine the health of the oyster reefs that they're finding, and whether or not to close the oyster season, the oyster reefs in that area. And that's why sometimes you might be seeing oyster reef 15 is closed in Matagorda Bay, for example. And I just made up those numbers and that name. I don't know if that's an actual example, but you may see reports like that. And that's how those reports are determined, by these oyster dredges. So that's how we determine health of oyster reefs, for example, through these specific techniques. Another way that we determine health of the fisheries is through long lines. And this is a direct partnership that we have through NOAA, through a program called CMAP. This is an acronym. I don't know exactly what it stands for, but we do this in partnership with NOAA. We set out a mile-long line, and this line has little hooks coming off of it. Each hook is baited. There's 100 hooks, and these hooks are designed to catch sharks, which is super cool. Sometimes we catch snapper as well, if any of y'all are snapper fishermen, and we can use this to determine the health of the shark fishery. And when I say fishery, I don't necessarily mean fishing for sharks. I also just mean the biodiversity of sharks in the area. So one of those is a photo of us setting the long lines, and another one of those, the other picture, is actually from last week when we caught a blacktip shark, and we were able to measure it, get some vitals, and send it off on its way unharmed. So that was super cool. So back to the other source of resource monitoring that we do, the fishery dependent survey, where we rely on anglers. The way that we get that type of data is through our recreational surveys. We do something called creel surveys, where we go to boat ramps and we interview anglers. We set ourselves up at boat ramps and we interview anglers. When they come back from their fishing trips, we go up to them and we say, "Excuse me, do you have time for a survey? Could you please tell us about the fish you caught? Can we measure them? Could you please tell us how you enjoyed today's fishing trip, what type of bait you caught your fish on, what type of gear you used?" And by collecting all this data and recording it down, etc., we can get a better idea of, like I said before, a more complete picture of the fishery in general. You can see there, for example, that's what it looks like when we set up shop at a specific boat ramp, and what it looks like when we measure a red drum at one of those creel survey stations. I really wanted to bring this up, for example, because pretty much every time we go and do a creel survey at one of these boat ramps, someone comes up to us and asks if we're game wardens. We are not game wardens. We are coastal fisheries. And that is a very big misconception that we get. And that's another reason why I really wanted to do this talk. Yeah, please get the word out there. There are two separate divisions doing two very separate tasks. The game wardens are enforcing the law. Coastal fisheries is trying to collect scientific data. And when you see the fisheries survey station sign, that is purely for scientific data collection. Anyway, this only matters if you're on the boat, if you're on a boat fishing for fish. There are some other fun things we get to do at Texas Parks and Wildlife Coastal Fisheries. It's not just all about going on the water and catching fish and getting paid for it. Sometimes we get paid to do sea turtle patrols when there's cold stuns. That's the photo you got to see a bit earlier during my introduction. Some of my coworkers and we got to help out during a recent cold stun in the Laguna Madre. We picked up at least 30 sea turtles in this one picture, and we took them all to Sea Turtle Inc., where they got rehabilitated and sent back into the Gulf. This was, I think, January of 2024. Sometimes we get sent red snapper that have been picked up by the US Coast Guard because they will find people who have crossed the border over in a fishing boat, and they will be catching our snapper with the intent of returning to Mexico to sell them. So we will get sent that snapper, and our job is to measure the snapper to determine what the sizes, measurements, sex, etc. is of the fish that would otherwise have been poached. And every year, all across the Texas coast, there is a crab trap cleanup that takes place, where abandoned crab traps are cleaned up because these traps, if left unattended, otherwise catch fish and kill them. So every year, all along the coast, and if you're up in the northern coast of Texas, you may have participated in one of these crab trap cleanups. But we get to help out with that as well, cleaning up the traps and making sure they stay out of our waterways and don't harm the fish or the crabs that may otherwise have gotten caught and forgotten. We do research here as well. I'm not entirely involved with that. I'm involved in the collection of data, not necessarily in the research. But the research is done at the Perry R. Bass Marine Fisheries Research Station. That's over in Palacios. But over there, they do genetic studies, age and growth, spawning studies, special studies, and they may ask us, for example, hey, when you do your gill nets, if you catch any mullet, could you please send them our way, because we want to look at their otoliths, which is an ear bone. We want to see their ear bones. So that could be a special study in that case. Or they may want to do forensics. So that's what the Perry R. Bass Marine Fisheries Research Station is all about. And when they talk about spawning studies, for example, they also have a hatchery over there. So that could be what that is related to. I know right now they're doing a lot of research on flounder, how to best raise flounder most efficiently. So that's why I put a picture of a flounder right there. I guess I also put a hatchery slide right here. So we've got 3 different hatcheries here with Texas Parks and Wildlife. And again, I don't work with the hatcheries. I can tell you that there's 3 different hatcheries. One is located in Corpus. That's the CCA Marine Development Center. The Perry R. Bass Research Station is in Palacios. They've also got a hatchery. And Sea Center, Texas is over in Lake Jackson. They've also got a hatchery. Right now they're raising red drum, spotted sea trout, and southern flounder. Those are their 3 species right now. I know at other times they raise different species, but right now they're really trying to optimize southern flounder. That's their focus species right now. They've got the other ones like under control. And I know pretty recently they released their 1 billionth fish, or 1 billionth red drum. So that was pretty cool. They named him Billy, in case any of y'all are wondering. Other things that Coastal Fisheries does, we do a lot. We have artificial reefs. We have 91 in the Gulf off of Texas. They consist of oil rig jackets, sunken ships, various clay, concrete, and fly ash structures. They are for fish and people to enjoy. So you can go dive them if you want. You can go fish them if you want. I'm sure some of them are designated non-fishable, but if you want to go enjoy them, go ahead. There's a map online somewhere, and I think I included a link in this PowerPoint file. We also work with many different partners, like the Gulf of Mexico Fishery Management Council, the Gulf State Marine Fisheries Commission, the National Marine Fisheries Service, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, especially with their sports fish restoration funds. I know their sticker is like all over our trucks. That's the end of section 1. I promise not all those sections are this long. All right, okay, so let's talk about what fish live on the Texas coast now that y'all are experts in coastal fisheries, now that y'all know exactly what we do and how we do it. What fish live here? Y'all are gonna be experts on fish by the time I'm done with you. We've got several groups of fish that live in Texas. That is several right there. So any of y'all who are well-versed in science know that these are not scientific names. These are just English names. And that's for a reason. Fish orders and families are very messy. Fish get moved around a lot. Fish names get changed a lot. And I do want to point out that English fish names are also very messy. They're not like birds. If y'all, I'm assuming some of y'all are birders. Y'all might know that the golden-cheeked warbler, for example, there's only one golden-cheeked warbler. There are no other golden-cheeked warblers. That is not the case with fish. If you were to say rock bass, for example, there are like 7 rock bass that you could be referring to. If you wanted to say the gray snapper, for example, there's multiple names that that fish has, the gray snapper. It is also called the mangrove snapper. So fish names are messy, and I want you to know that going into this. So just take a lot of this with a grain of salt, okay? We're gonna group these fish. We're gonna group these fish into these groups, and you're gonna learn these names and go, okay, this is what they're usually called. This is not what they're always called, okay? All right, cool. Fish names are weird. We know that now. The scientific names are always what they're called until they get changed. Cool. After that, you got to learn how to ID fish, okay? So how do you identify a fish? It's not as easy as it looks, okay? So identifying fish is also a little difficult. So I go off of 2 different things for identifying fish. I go off of body shape and fin counts. Body shape is probably the first thing I go off of. When I look at a fish that I don't recognize, I'll probably pull out my fish ID book and I'll look at the different plates. So that's the different pictures of all the different fish that exist in my area. And I'll just compare different body shapes. Once I find a fish that looks similar in shape to the fish that I'm looking at, I'll go, okay, body shape, check. So that's probably the first step I'll use. The second step is going to be fin counts, and this is how you're going to confirm the fish that you're looking at. So fin counts goes like this. Do you see these fins on the fish? All fish have fins. That's not true. Most fish have fins. All the fish you're probably going to encounter have fins. So here you've got the dorsal fin. This is an important fin. You've got the anal fin. This is a very important fin. These are probably the 2 fins you're going to want to focus on. So each of these fins have these little things coming out of them. They're called rays. You're going to want to count these. You're going to want to get ray counts. That's what they're called. And most species of fish have unique counts when it comes to these ray counts. If you can determine that this fish, I'm going to make up a number, that this fish has 10 spiny rays and 12 soft rays, and that the largemouth bass has 10 spiny rays and 12 soft rays, then congratulations. The fish you're looking at is a largemouth bass. I'm going to tell you right now, the fish on the screen is a largemouth bass. And I'm also going to tell you, I just made up numbers, but that's how you identify fish. You make sure that the ray counts match up. If you get numbers that don't match what's in your ID book, you go, oh no, I'm going to try again. And you keep doing that until the counts match up. This is trickier than just counting, because sometimes the rays will branch off halfway in the middle. Sometimes the rays are so tiny you can't see them. Sometimes fish will break their fins. Sometimes the rays match up, like two different species of fish will have the same count of rays between two different species. So then you've got to count different types of fins. So you might have to move to the anal fin, for example, and count those number of rays, or maybe the pelvic fin, or the pectoral fin, or maybe even the caudal fin. So that's what you got to do to ID fish. You got to look at the overall body shape, and you got to look at fin counts. That's typically what you've got to do. There are some other tricky fish out there where you've got to do some really wacky things, like you've got to count scales along the lateral line, or you've got to open up their gills and count gill rakers, or you've got to open up their stomach. And at that point, like, just leave it at the genus, okay? Like, at that point, don't ID it. Or really test yourself. Like, but you know, at that point, like, even I get frustrated, okay? If most fish you can identify by counting the fin rays. But if you know what each fin is, and if you can count rays, and if you can look at two different photos and tell that this shape looks similar to this shape, then you can identify a fish. Cool. Something else I want to point out is that fish, after they die, tend to lose their color. So sometimes you'll see pictures of fish and they'll be very colorful. And you'll look at your fish and it'll look very similar, but it'll be very dull in color. That doesn't mean it's not the same fish. I just want you to keep that in mind, okay? So the physical features mean a lot more to identification of fish than the color does. So just because the colors don't match doesn't mean you're not looking at the same fish. So just keep that in mind. Shape, rays, not necessarily color. Although color does help if you have a fresh fish or a live fish. Anyway, we were talking about groups of fish. We're looking at all these different groups of fish. All these groups of fish live in Texas. Let's look at them. Anchovies. You're going to find these fish if you are ever right on the coast looking through the weeds. You will probably find bay anchovies. These things live all together, and you could put them on pizza, I guess, but you probably shouldn't. They're like that big. So if you ever find a fish, it's like that big, and it's got a big mouth. You can see how big that mouth is. It goes right behind the eye. You're probably looking at a bay anchovy. So that's pretty cool. Something pretty cool about this fish is that it looks pretty similar to an inland silverside, but it's not the inland silverside. So make sure that whenever you look at this fish, you're not confusing it with the inland silverside. And I just actually realized I didn't put the inland silverside in here. So after this, you might want to go and familiarize yourself with the inland silverside, just to make sure you don't get yourself confused. The inland silverside's mouth does not go as far back. I do want to also note, not all fish have two dorsal fins. This one only has one, for example. There are other types of anchovies off the coast of Texas. There are striped and duskies, but this is the most common one you're going to encounter. The other ones you're going to find offshore, and they're going to be a lot bigger. You also get blennies and gobies. These fish are super cool. They're cigar-shaped. They come in all different patterns. Like you can see this one in the top left corner is pretty short and stout, while this one that's almost near the bottom is very long, and it's got this striped pattern. But these ones are bottom dwellers, and their pelvic fins, which are the ones that are on the bottom underneath their pectoral fins, which are kind of like their arm fins, their pelvic fins. they're fused into what's kind of like a suction cup so that they can stick to rocks. It's super cool and it's super cute. So that's what makes gobies unique. There's one blenny that I have highlighted down here, and they've got these little antenna things on here, and they're called cirri. And that's what makes blennies unique. That's how you can immediately ID a blenny. The rest of these here are gobies. If you look right here, this one in the top left corner is the darter goby that I have written on the slide. The crested blenny is the one in the bottom right. I also have a code goby in the top right, a high fin, which is right underneath the darter goby. It's got that dot on it, which makes it pretty easy to identify if you know your fish. And I've got the violet goby, which is that very long one with the stripes. There is also a fat sleeper that you can sometimes find along the Texas coast. They look exactly like gobies, except they do not have that fused fin. We've got drums off the coast. So if any of y'all are fishermen, you probably recognize these. These are very large fish, and they get their name because they have this muscle in their body that can hit against their swim bladder, and it makes a drumming noise. They kind of go when they're really mad, which is really funny to see. And for those of y'all who are unaware, the swim bladder is an additional organ that some fish have. It's kind of like the predecessor to a lung, but they can take in and take out gas, and it helps them stay buoyant in the water so that they're not always rising to the top or sinking to the bottom. Anyway, they can hit that muscle against their swim bladder and go when they're really angry. So if you ever go fishing for these guys and you pull them out of the water, they're probably going to go because they're really mad. Anyway, I've got the redfish in the top left, the black drum in the top right, and then the spotted sea trout in the middle on the bottom. These are all super popular game fish here in Texas, and a lot of what we do here at Coastal Fisheries revolves around these three fish. But there's a lot of other popular game fish here that also qualify as drums. We've got whiting, so those are kingfish, southern and Gulf kingfish. We've got sand and silver trout that are also considered drums. But then we've also got croakers, which get used as bait. We've got star and banded drum. We've got spot. We've got silver perch. Just a bunch of other fish that qualify as drums. And that doesn't even include the freshwater drum, which I'm not getting into. That's not a coastal fish. Next are flatfish, because we're going alphabetically. So these are all the fish that are flat. So y'all probably recognize flounder. This is the southern flounder in the top left. These do not have a pattern, and that's what makes them instantly recognizable. All the other flounders that live in Texas have some sort of pattern. So these guys are super popular as game fish, and if you want to go fishing for them, the best way to do so is to go gigging. You got to go outside late at night with a flashlight and with something that looks like a trident. You literally shine a flashlight on them to stun them, and then you go, boom. I've heard it's really fun. So, I don't know. I've never done it. They form aggregations pretty much on the shoreline whenever it's time for them to breed. And one of our regulations here at Coastal Fisheries, if you're a fisherman, is that during those aggregation periods, November to December, you're not allowed to fish for them because, well, for one, they're breeding, and for two, it'd be a little too easy to just demolish the entire population because they're all in one area. So in the top right, we also have the baywith. So it's another type of flatfish we have here, except instead of like the southern flounder being a foot long, this one's only a few inches. You can kind of see by the ruler there, the scale of how different these two fish are, even though, you know, on a slide, they look like they're the same size. We also get Gulf, oscillated, fringed, and shoal flounders, and those come in a range of sizes as well. Like fringed and shoal flounders are also several inches long, but then Gulf and oscillated are like a foot long as well. I also put in here a tonguefish. This is another type of flatfish that we get here in Texas. And these are also like They're kind of weird looking comparison to flounder. They don't have that like fringe and they don't have that distinct tail. But I put this one in specifically because, you know, flounders are unique in that when they're very young, both of their eyes move to one side of their head. But this one that we caught right here, it only has one eye. And we thought this was so funny. You know, and we checked. It's not even that one eye never moved over. It only had one eye. So this was the funniest thing we ever saw. And I just put it in here to be like, wow, aren't fish so funny? Anyway, this is a black cheek tonguefish. And you can see he's got a little black spot right here. And I guess if you look at it from some sort of angle, he could look like a tongue. So yes, this is the black cheek tonguefish, the one-eyed black cheek tonguefish. There you go. Just a sampling of some of the flatfish we have here in Texas. Next are herring. We have one herring. It is the Gulf menhaden. It is the backbone of the entire food web here in the Gulf. These things start out as like this size and they form schools of like thousands, and they're great bait food for anything that's tiny. They grow to be like, what's that? A foot long, and then they're great food for things that are much larger. They're just a great source of food for pretty much everything on the food web. Yep, that's pretty much all I have to say. That's pretty much the most common herring that you're going to find in Texas because it is so abundant. We do get others. We do get like the scaled sardine, the gizzard shad, and the fine-scaled menhaden. The fine-scaled you're not really gonna find unless you're looking for it, but even when you're looking for it, you don't really find it. So probably if you're gonna find a herring, you're gonna find the Gulf menhaden. So yeah. Next we got jacks. These have a very iconic body shape. You can kind of see that top dorsal fin matches its bottom anal fin. They both kind of curve out like that. And you might recognize that this is either like the sport fish or that fish you always see at the aquarium. So yeah, I've got a Jack Crevalle here in the top left, a Pompano in the top right, and a look down in the bottom right. Those are the fish you always see at aquariums in schools of like 30. And they look so cool. They swim like little silver dollars. It's so cool to watch them. And whatever jacks you're thinking of extra that live in Texas, yeah, we probably have them. And they all have Jack in the name. We got amberjacks, Atlantic bumpers. There's also moonfish, blue runners, and permits. And whatever you're thinking they look like, yeah, they all look like this. So if you ever see a fish that's got these general fins, yeah, it's probably a jack. You probably got it. We've also got killifish and live bearers. So these are other really small fishes that are going to live amongst the shoreline, like amongst all those little rushes and grasses in the marshes. I've highlighted two really distinct looking ones, but some of the killifish you're going to find just look kind of bland. And I feel really bad saying that, but some killifish are hard to identify. So that's why I didn't put them on the slide. And I'm going to be honest, this picture of the Gulf killifish I put up on here, this is when it's at its prettiest. So I don't know how to put this into like the best scientific terminology. I don't want to say breeding plumage because it's not breeding plumage, but these killifish are like they're in their breeding plumage basically. They're not this colorful at all times of year. This is like when they're ready to mate. So this is the prettiest you're ever going to see a Gulf killifish in the top left. The long-nosed killifish is the one in the top right. They're very stripy, and if you ever go, I believe it's Alabama eastward in the Gulf, you're going to see a fish that looks exactly like this, but it's called the striped killifish. So this is like a Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi exclusive species of fish. I also threw in the sailfin molly here just because it looks very similar to a killifish, but it's not. It's a different family, I want to say. And they give birth to live fish, which is actually very rare in the fish world. And this fish is also strange because you kind of associate them with like aquariums, I think. And they just look very cool, in my opinion. They've got that, the males especially have that very long dorsal fin, and they've got this pattern that's like dots in a line to the point where it almost looks like a straight line. So I think these mollies are very iconic. And again, these mollies are also in a breeding plumage, for lack of better words. But anyway, I mentioned that some killifish, they kind of look not as pretty. So you also have bayou and rainwater killifish that are a bit more dull. They don't really have a pattern, and they're a little harder to identify. There's also the diamond killifish, which kind of reminds me a bit more of a sailfin molly, but imagine it's like taller, and the dorsal fin looks more like it does on the bottom fish, which is a female. So that would be like the diamond killifish. Those are some of the killifish that are most common in Texas. Next, we're moving on to my least favorite, and by least favorite, I mean most favorite, the moharas. You will probably find these if you ever like dump a hand net into the water and just scoop for fish, but these are almost impossible to identify just because they all look almost exactly the same. You can ID them out if you take your time. So the one in the top left is a flagfin mohara, and this is probably the easiest one to identify just because it's got the black and then white on its dorsal fin, but then the rest of them get a lot trickier. So I can tell you the one on the bottom left is an Irish pompano, just because I can tell from looking at these for so long, like its body is a little taller. And then the two on the right, you kind of have to just, I don't want to say guess, because it's not about guessing when it comes to species, right? But to identify between the spotfin mohara and the silver jenny, what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to look at the fish straight on its head, and there either is or isn't a scale right here. So you got to look at it under a microscope and either say, is there or is there not a scale right here? And if there is, I believe it's a silver jenny. And if there's not, it's a spotfin. Or I might have gotten that mixed up. And that's how you tell the difference. That's the only way to tell the difference. So these two are very difficult to tell apart. And if you're ever in that scenario, it's probably better to just leave it at genus. I'm going to be completely honest. It's probably better to just say, this is a mohara, and move on. So, with that in mind, those are moharas. Those are the weird and wonderful moharas. But the good news is, these are the only moharas you have to worry about. There is the yellowfin mohara, but it has yellow fins. So that is very easy to distinguish from the rest of these. These are the only weird and wonderful moharas you have to worry about. And with that, we're going to move on to better fish, in my opinion, because they are pipefishes and seahorses. Some people don't know they're related. Now you know they're related. We've got the curly seahorses and the uncurly seahorses. So we've got Gulf pipefish and Shane pipefish. These are two of our most common pipefishes. The Gulf pipefish, you're going to be able to tell it apart from the chain pipefish because its snout is a little shorter. So if you look carefully at some of the faces between these two pipefishes, you're going to notice that the pipefish have kind of what looks like a jawline. And if you compare the length between the snout and the start of the eye versus the end of the eye and the jawline, you're going to be able to say, hey, wait a minute. It looks like that distance is either exactly the same or a little bit longer. So with the Gulf pipefish, that length is about the same between the snout and the eye and the jawline, versus the chain pipefish, where the snout and the eye is a little bit longer than the eye and the jawline. So with the Gulf pipefish, that's about 50-50, and the chain pipefish, I believe it's like 60-40. I don't know, there's an exact ratio that's used, but for your purposes, you can say longer versus exactly the same. So that's Gulf versus chain pipefish. And you can also see in these photos here, the Gulf tends to have stripes, while a chain has a chain pattern. The dwarf seahorse, there's ways to identify it, right? But because you're in Texas and Texas doesn't really have seahorses, you can tell because it's tiny and it's a seahorse, and seahorses are cute. You can see from this photo here that, I mean, look at that. That's like this big. That's like a centimeter or maybe 2 centimeters. It's a seahorse. It's adorable. We do have another seahorse. It's a lined seahorse, but that thing's gonna be like an inch or 2. So if you ever find one that's not that big, it's probably a dwarf seahorse. And we do have other pipefish. We've got the sargassum and the opossum pipefish, but I'll be honest, I've worked here for almost 2 years now. I've never seen one of those. You're probably gonna see a Gulf or a chain. But if you see another one, like, please let me know, because I'd love to see one. Next, we got the sea robins, which I think are super cool. So these fish, they get their names from their super cool wings. These are just their pectoral fins, their hand fins. And when they feel threatened, or when they want to like just show off, I guess, they flex out their hand fins, and other fish go, whoa, like, I'm not gonna mess with you. You just showed off like big, beautiful colors, or you're way bigger than I thought you were. And they swim away. So I think one of the most common sea robins we have here is the bighead sea robin, and it's got a very big head. That's really how you tell it apart. It's in the top left corner here. It's also got this black dot here on its dorsal fin. That's one of the other ways you tell it apart. There's more sophisticated ways, but compared to other sea robins, its head is large. We've also got the bandtail sea robin, which has these distinct bands on its tail compared to other sea robins, and not as common as those other two. A little more further offshore, we've got the blue-spotted sea robin, but I just wanted to point him out because look how pretty his fins are. That's so pretty. And he lives here in Texas. He's one of our fish. That's so cool. We've got other species as well. Like we've got a big eye sea robin and a leopard sea robin. We've got several others. They all live offshore in deep water. So that's kind of the downside of having all these cool sea robins. I'm sorry, you're probably never gonna see one unless you go scuba diving. So there's that. The big heads and the bandtails, you might see one, like in our bay system or something. So that's pretty cool. All the pretty ones live further offshore. And a lot of the time with sea robins, how you identify them is by looking at their pectoral fins, just because of how unique they are. With the big head and the bandtail, it's with the head and with the tail. But now we're gonna look at some really cool fish. Sharks. I believe it might be Shark Week. I don't actually know. I've just been seeing a lot of posts. So we're gonna talk about the great and fun sharks. They're awesome. They're cool. We're going to talk about them, and we're not going to spread hate in the chat. We're going to admire them. We're going to love them, and we're not going to disrespect them. We are going to respect them. Okay, cool. So I've highlighted 4 different species of sharks that live here off the coast of Texas, and they're all pretty abundant as far as I know. First up, we've got the black tip. This is in the top left. These are pretty common. I've seen these off the coast of Texas. They're pretty cool and pretty easy to identify because they have black tips on their fins. Pretty easy to identify. Something a little strange, though, that I have found about their identification is that there is another species of shark called the spinner shark, and they also have black tips on their fins. And the way you tell them apart is that the spinner shark has an extra black tip here on this fin right here, but the black tip does not have a black tip here. So that's the difference between those two sharks, which I've always found a little strange, but that's something you should know. Black tips do not have a black tip right here, but there is a different species of shark that has all these black tips plus one extra. Anyway, the black tip has black tips on all its fins. Next is the bonnet head. It is a type of hammerhead shark. It is adorable. It doesn't grow that big. It has this little rounded head. I'm forgetting the technical term for this. And it has an adorable little name. We've also got the Atlantic sharp-nosed shark. These things are also very tiny. They don't grow to be more than 3 feet long in their entire lifespan. That is adorable. When they're tiny, they have these little white spots before they mature. And I've heard them get referred to as the rats of the sea. That's not very flattering, but if anything, that might tell you just how many there are in the Gulf. So that's super cool. There's so many of them. You might find one and say, wow, a baby shark. And no, that's not a baby, that's an adult. So that's super cool. And I did want to bring up the bull shark just because there are so many of them off the coast of Texas. There are recent studies coming out saying there are an increasing number off the coast of Texas, and I think it is important that y'all know how to identify them. So how do you identify the bull shark? For one, it's got a ridge in between these top 2 dorsal fins. So not all sharks have this. It's literally a ridge that goes in between those 2 fins. And the other distinguishing factor is that it's rounded. That doesn't mean a lot, does it? Especially if you don't look at sharks all that often. But if you look at like 70 different sharks and then you compare it to this shark, you might say, wow, this shark does look a little rounder. Like this nose does look a bit rounded, and the head, like looking at it head on, the body does look very rounded. But that's how you identify it. I really don't know what more to say than that. Bull sharks are tricky to identify, and it is part of the reason why when I'm gonna say shark-related events happen, people might misidentify sharks as bull sharks, or they might mis-ID a bull shark as something else. So I want you all to be aware that this is how you identify a bull shark. It needs to have that ridge and it needs to be rounded. So keep that in mind if you ever see a shark, before yelling out bull shark or before saying a bull shark is something else. It needs to be rounded, it needs to have the ridge. And there may be other features that the shark you're looking at may have that bull sharks do not have. But yes, bull sharks are increasing in number off the coast of Texas. There are many people looking at what could be the cause of this. We do not know what the cause of this is yet. I am one of those people. If any of y'all ever see a bull shark, please let me know. I would love to hear about it because I think bull sharks are cool. Also, I just think sharks are cool. If y'all have anything to say about sharks, please let me know. I'd love to hear it. Anyway, let's move on. Snapper. Snapper are cool too. They're big underwater fish. All fish are underwater. They're big fish that live on reefs. So 2 of the big fish that we have, we've got red snapper and mangrove snapper. This is one of those fish I was talking about earlier. They get called both mangrove and gray snapper. One of the reasons they get called gray snapper is because when they're young, they're gray, but they grow up and become this burgundy color. And I realize right now that it's 1, so I'm gonna try to speed things up a little. Some other snapper that we've got lane, vermilion, and queen snapper, and also wenchman. But snapper have this sort of shape to them, and you're only really ever going to find them on reefs. So if you find one outside of a reef, or it's either a gray snapper or it's not a snapper. So now you know. This is one of my favorite groups of fish, and I know I say that about a lot of things. We've got their triggerfish, filefish, and puffers. They're all united by their unique teeth. They're known as tetradoniformes. Ooh, that's a fun vocab word to learn today. It means 4 fused teeth. So we've got several of this group of fish today. We've got plainhead filefish in the top left corner. We've got gray triggerfish right underneath. A scrolled cowfish that I'm holding in my hand. He was released. A striped burrfish I'm also holding in my hand. He was released. And a least puffer here. He was released. All of these fish should be at least identifiable to this group of triggers, files, puffers, because they have that unique body shape that is kind of, you know, an external skeleton almost. I hope at least y'all can identify that something is a pufferfish. But if not, at least be able to say, this could be a triggerfish or a filefish or a cowfish. As long as y'all can say that, I'm happy. We do have dotterel and orange filefish, and you may see these in aquariums. I've seen dotterel filefish in aquariums, so that's cool. We also have smooth puffers here, and I've seen people call them rabbitfish. I've seen people fish and eat rabbitfish. So that's something you may encounter at some point in your life. Another favorite group of mine, the rays and skates. We've got a lot of rays and skates off our coast, and some of y'all may have good encounters with them. Some of y'all may have bad encounters with them. We've got Atlantic stingrays, southern stingrays. We've got smooth butterfly rays. Personally, I love them. We've got cownose rays, and personally, I love them. We've got lesser electric rays, and I love these too. We've got roundel skates. This is probably one of our most common skate species off of our coast, and these are the ones that are going to lay those mermaid purses if you ever see them washing up on the beach and you're ever wondering, hey, what do those come from? Probably a roundel skate, but we do have some other species of skates that they could be coming from. This is probably one of our most common. We also do have blunt nose rays, which look very similar to the southern stingray. We've got spotted eagle rays, which, if you remember my picture of the bay and gulf trawls, that was my coworker holding one. And we have manta rays as well, which are super, super cool. Here's a fun fact, not all stingrays have the barb. So if you are worried about getting barbed by a stingray, the smooth butterfly ray does not have a barb. Also, the lesser electric ray does not have a barb, but that's because it has electricity. Will it kill you? No. I should know. I've been electrocuted. It feels weird. It does not hurt, it just feels weird. So now you know. I do have a random category just because I couldn't really figure out where to put all these fish, and these are all very common fish that you would find off of our coast. I've got striped mullet here. I've seen these swimming in schools, like at nature centers, so this is what a striped mullet looks like. I've got a pinfish. These are very common to find right off of our coast. I've got the hardhead catfish. People either love these or hate these. Mostly they hate these. Here's a sheep's head. I see these swimming off docks all of the time. And I've got the Gulf toadfish. I just think these are hilarious. I love them. Pinfish and sheep's head, they kind of go together as a group of fish known as porgies. So that's a pretty cool fun fact. And that's what they look like. And finally, I've got my big and beautiful category. I cannot talk about Texas fish without talking about the big and beautiful Texas fish, because what would we be without our majestic megafauna? I've got the alligator gar. I had a picture of me holding one earlier. This guy is also lucky enough to hold one. Alligator gar live forever, apparently, but they can live to be like 50 plus years old, and they grow to be like 6-7 feet long. They're wonderful. We've also got swordfish, and with that, also marlins also live in Texas waters. It's amazing. We've got manta rays, and I didn't specify which type of manta ray. Did you know there's 2 different species of manta ray, and both have been recorded off of the Flower Banks, which is the marine sanctuary off the coast of Galveston. And we've got whale sharks. I know for a fact whale sharks have been seen off the coast of South Padre Island, which is where I work. So, yeah, whale sharks are in Texas. And if you know where I can find one, please let me know. And I can't even begin to talk about like how many other animals you can find off the coast of Texas. I know I have not talked about every single fish, even though it sounds like I have, but I have not talked about every single invertebrate. There's a website where you can find pretty much every single fish, crab, shrimp, plant, etc., that lives on the coast. And that's this website right here, texmarsspecies.tamug.edu, hosted by our friends at A&M Galveston. And if you want a very reliable field guide, maybe not like beginner friendly, but if you've ever used a field guide before, then you'll be good to go. It's Fishes of the Gulf of Mexico, written by these two lovely authors. This is the book that we use at our field station, and I'm pretty sure every other field station at Coastal Fisheries. This is a great book and a great reference to ID every single fish you ever need to ID in Texas. Anyway, last part of the presentation. How can you, as a master naturalist, help us out at Coastal Fisheries with all that we're doing? Here are some very small things you can do. You can volunteer with your local field station. So we go out and collect data like all the time. So there's a form somewhere on the internet. I think I linked it somewhere, to go reach out to your local field station if you do live by the coast, to help us with our bag seines or our bait trawls, or to help us process our data. And you can help us out with that because we could always use a helping hand. And if you maybe live more inland, I'm sure the inland fisheries could use help with that. So yeah, you could reach out and help us out with that. If you've noticed any fish kills and oil spills near where you live, even if you're not by the coast, we've got an entire team trained to help with that. There are kills and spills team. And how can we respond to kills and spills if we don't know about them? So if you let us know about that using our form, we can go out and we can manage the kills, we can clean up the spills, and make sure that we can get our ecosystem back into prime condition. You can dive our reefs, because here we have 91 artificial reefs, and if nobody's using them, then what's the point of the reefs? So I believe, linked a map of every single reef we have, and I'll be honest, like half of them are at the flower gardens, so that's a bit of a commitment, but go check out those reefs. There are so many cool critters at them, and I've already said there's manta rays that have been spotted at those reefs, so I honestly believe it's worth the trek. Go check out those reefs, and if you want to invite me, I would not say no. You can, if you want to go fishing, go purchase a fishing license. All of those funds go back to Texas Parks and Wildlife, and we would greatly appreciate it. Go post your fish pics on iNaturalist. I would be lying if I said I did not go on iNaturalist and look up photos of fish to help me identify the fish I was looking at on the table. Okay, like there are fish that have stumped me so badly when I'm looking at the fish I've collected, and I've just been like, I don't know, is it a so-and-so? So I go on iNaturalist and I type in so-and-so, and I look at all the other photos that users have submitted and gone, huh, okay, I believe it is. Thanks, whoever submitted this photo. So if you post your fish pics or even just help others ID their fish pics and get them to that research grade status, that is super helpful for people like me who use those pics to help ID the fish that we collect. Or, and I suppose this isn't really a small thing you can do, this is just a fun fact that most people don't know. Did you know that at Texas state parks, you can fish for free without a fishing license? You do not need one at a state park. And some state parks actually will loan out fishing gear to you as well. So any state park that has an area where you can go fishing, you can fish without a fishing license. And there are state parks that are on the beach. So you can potentially go beach fishing without a fishing license for free. And I encourage you to take advantage of that next time you are at a state park, because if you can begin to appreciate what other anglers begin to appreciate, then maybe you can begin to appreciate why we do what we do here at Coastal Fisheries. And I'm sure you already do if you're at this talk, but gain an even bigger appreciation for all the things that we do. And I guess with that, I open up. Do y'all have any questions? And I'll be honest, I don't know if I have any time for questions or not. If
Tia,
I here.
your presentation, like your enthusiasm for this topic and the fishery in general is just infectious. Someone else already mentioned that in the chat, and I want to say that listening to you today certainly has brightened my day, and your enthusiasm for this topic. It's 1:15 now. There are several questions, and I feel that we could be on all day with all the questions, the great questions in the chat. I'm wondering, I'd like to propose if we send you those questions and maybe a written response to some of the questions, and we can post those on our website. I know you've got work you probably need to get back to.
I mean, I just got to drive to Rockport.
Yeah. So does that sound like a good solution for us to send you the questions, the major questions from the chat regarding the presentation? And then you could update those, update some responses to those, and we can get it on as a written document to our website.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Again, thank you so much, Tia, for your offer to do this presentation in the first place, and then the changing things up a little bit and doing it as a TMN Tuesday for us. We had over 300 people online today, so thank you again for everything, and we'll be getting those questions to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.